With the 2024 NFL season wrapping up, I wanted to take some time today to go over the top 10 quarterbacks that are going to be going into 2025. And I took a lot of time with this list. I based it a lot off what has happened the previous year. There were some breakout seasons for quarterbacks last year, and I really took some time to incorporate that into the top 10 list. Completely different list in certain factors than I had last year. I did, however, factor a little bit of a 5-year span of some of these guys, what they've done. I did take some of that into consideration because it would be foolish not to, not always taking just a sample size of 1 year and having that be the end all be all. But with further ado, I want to get right into this list right away. And we're going to start at the number 10 at quarterback in the NFL right now. And I have Baker Mayfield in this spot. And if you look at what he did this year, he had a great breakout year. I honestly think this is his best year so far in the NFL as a quarterback. He had 4,500 passing yards. That was third in the NFL. He had 41 passing touchdowns, tied for second. And if you look at it, if you look at these yards and these touchdowns, a lot of the season he had Chris Godwin and Mike Evans injured. They were injured for a lot of it. And I know Mike Evans hit 1,000 yards, but he barely hit it. He really was able to throw the ball to a lot of different people. And you look at his arm strength and accuracy. This is a quarterback that I always said, even when he was at Cleveland, if he can just sit in the pocket and he can get down there and he can deliver the right strikes to these receivers, he can be a very valuable quarterback, and he was. And Tampa had a really, really strong year with him at the quarterback position, and I thought he played really well. I expect him to just keep going up, but I think it's awesome that Baker, after what he went through, what he had to go through, was able to have a good statistical year like this and really push himself in to the top 10 category. And I think there's more good things to come from Baker Mayfield for sure. Going to 9, I'm going to put Jared Goff here. And a lot of people are kind of sour on Goff. They don't really like his game for the most part. A lot of these numbers don't lie. He had 4,629 passing yards this year. That was second in all of the NFL. And you can say what you want to say about how deep the roster is, how many weapons they have. But, at the end of the day, somebody still has to get them the ball, and Goff was able to do this really well at an effective rate. He had 37 touchdowns this year, really solid QBR at 68.4. That's good enough for sixth in the NFL. He had a really good statistical year, and I think you see it. A lot of the trend in the NFL right now is if you can sit in the pocket and you can throw a good football, then you're going to put the numbers up and your team is just going to have success. And that's what he has been able to do. He's not seeing a lot of credit from what he's been able to do in the NFL so far, but I definitely think he's a top 10 quarterback, and I have a number 9 on this list. Might be a bit of a controversial take for some people, but I think he throws a really good ball. I think his accuracy is really solid. Sometimes he can get out of line, throw picks. He had 12 picks on the year, but for the most part, really, really solid player on a team that I thought was really good until they just started getting injury after injury after injury. Moving on to 8, we have Matthew Stafford. And this is the thing where I took kind of the 5 years of play in the factor. I think that if you're talking about quarterbacks who you would want on your roster to lead your team to a Super Bowl, I think Matt Stafford's one of the best in that category. His numbers didn't jump off the chart this year. 3,762 passing yards, good enough for 13, 20 TDs, 15th. Numbers weren't crazy this year, but you also have to factor there was a big stretch of the season where Puka was out, and once Puka Nacua came in, they started rolling. If you look at it, they were one scoring drive away from beating the Super Bowl champion Eagles in that playoff game in Philadelphia. He's a quarterback that can get a team, and we don't even know if he's going to be on the Rams this next year, but he's a quarterback that can get a team in position to be really good. Even if you look back at his days in the Lions, he put up great statistical numbers. They just couldn't build a team around him. I think he's a really solid quarterback wherever he lands. I have him in my top 10. I have him at number 8. Now we get into number 7, and we go to the rookie, Jaden Daniels. And he had one of the best rookie seasons I think we've ever seen in the NFL. What he was able to do, where he was able to get his team, it made me want to potentially even put him higher. That's how good of a rookie year that he had. Went to the NFC Championship game, obviously got beat by the Eagles, but nobody was really able to contend with the Eagles towards the end of the year. There we saw the Chiefs, what happened to them. But if you look at his numbers, like 3,568 passing yards, 25 TDs, but then you look at he had 891 rush yards. He had a really solid year. He's done a lot. He is one of those quarterbacks and one of those people in these sports leagues that it just seems like the pressure doesn't get to him, which is really rare in young athletes. Usually the pressure when you're a younger player in one of these leagues, it gets to you. And it seems like there's a cool confidence there, able to just distribute. And it looks like he's an elevator, able to make his team a lot better. I think that at the end of next year, if he's able to not have the sophomore slump, one that a guy like CJ Stroud had, we could be talking about this guy in the top 5. We really could. I was really thinking about putting him higher, but it's only been 1 year of sample size, a great year, that is, but I think he was good enough to be in that 7 slot, and that's where I have Jaden Daniels at this moment. Now we go to 6, and this is a guy that last year I had him in the top 5. He regressed for me, and I think for a lot of people, he's regressed even further, but that's Justin Herbert. And I thought he had a really good regular season. I thought he had a really good regular season, but the knock is going to be how bad he played in that playoff game. Shocked me. That playoff game was very surprising to me because he had been playing at a really high level in the regular season. I thought that he had kind of really gotten everything together. And you look at his numbers, 3,870 passing yards, good enough for 23 touchdowns, 12. Look at the numbers, but then you look at he only had 3 interceptions in the regular season. I don't know what happened in that playoff game. Maybe the big stage pressure has got to him. But what I really want to wait and see with Justin Herbert is how he is able to do with a better receiver in that room. Let's get him a receiver first, and then we make critical evaluations on him. Because I think what he's been able to do, like his best receiver out there is Ladd. And Ladd, this is not taking away anything from Ladd. It's just he is clearly not going to be the guy right now. You can't depend on a rookie to be your number 1 receiver at that level. And I think there's a lot of upside still for Herbert. I think there's a lot of still upside for that Chargers team. But from what I've seen so far, he did regress, but he's definitely still a top 10 quarterback. I have him at 6. That for a lot of people, I think that might be a little high on this list, but I just think that if you look at it, what he will be able to do, I think 6 is a fine spot. Number 5 is Jalen Hurts, and this is a guy that moved up like very high for me this year. And I really thought last year he just had such a bad end of that season that I thought it was very possible that he might have just been very relevant due to a previous coordinator that he had the first year. And he shut all that down. Great year. I think a lot of the Eagles' success did come in the regular season from Saquon Barkley, but you cannot take away anything that Jalen Hurts was able to do this year. 630 rushing yards, 2,903 passing yards, tied for 20th, 18 touchdowns, tied for 20th. But then you look at the 14 rush TDs, only 5 interceptions. He had some of the throws he was making in the playoffs, especially that one to Devontae Smith in the Super Bowl. It was like, this guy can really sling it. And the versatility, the tush-push play, he does that play, specific play, better than anybody's ever been able to do it in NFL history. So that's got to bump you up. So I think that from what he's done, what he's been able to do, winning that Super Bowl the way he did, I think you have to put him in the top 5 conversation. And that's why I'm going to put him at 5 right now. And, I think that he could go up. I think the sky's the limit, but he really turned it around. Because I don't know if I had him in the top 10, which is crazy when I say it now, but he had such a bad end to the 2023 season where he was just a pick mag and he was throwing a lot of interceptions. And he really turned that around this year. Going on to fourth, this is where it gets just really tough for me. And number 4, although he had a phenomenal season, I'm putting Lamar Jackson here. And it kills me to put Lamar Jackson here. If you look at the numbers, 915 rushing yards, 4,172 passing yards, good enough for 6th in the NFL, 41 touchdowns, tied second, only 4 interceptions. And not to mention, he had the highest QBR in the NFL, 77.3. Phenomenal year for him, way better than the season that he had last year when he won the MVP. And I think part of this is what he's done in the playoffs. And I'm not going to knock him a lot, not to knock him as much as some of these other guys are from his postseason woes, but it comes a point where it's really competitive at the top with these quarterbacks, and I have to start putting people in those conversations of can they get over the hump of the playoffs, because regular season, it's incredible statistically. Like I think he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, and I think he's in his prime, but it's so high up at this list that it's tough to differentiate these people. And what I have to go to is postseason success. But really talented quarterback. I think in a lot of different eras, he's the best quarterback in the NFL. But right now, with who sits in front of him, I have no choice but to put him at 4th. Going to 3rd, got to give Burrow the credit that's due for the season that he had. You look at it, 1st in passing yards, 4,918. 1st in touchdown passes, 43. I mean, you lead those categories, and he didn't get a single MVP vote, and he had that strong of a year. Now, there's things you could point to. You could point to that he probably has the best receiver in the NFL that he's throwing to. He also has probably the best number 2 receiver in the NFL in T. Higgins as well. But what he was able to do this year, really to will that. How many wins do the Bengals have without Joe Burrow as their quarterback? I don't know, 4, 5 maybe. He means a lot to that team. And the only reason I put him here at this moment is because the team's success and what that's been. And I know a lot of that doesn't fall on Joe Burrow. A lot of that falls on the front office. A lot of that falls on the defense. And a lot of that falls on special teams woes that they've had. But you look at his numbers, he's easily a top 3 quarterback. If you put him at 2, it wouldn't be crazy. Look at the numbers. The numbers usually don't lie, and he had a really good year. I got Joe Burrow as the number 3 quarterback in the NFL going in to 2025. Number 2, I'm putting the reigning MVP here, Josh Allen. And he had a great year. Some of the athleticism and the plays that he has been able to make and just the unbelievableness of it, that's why he's number 2 on this list. 531 rush yards. The passing stats aren't blow you out of the, but from what he did on a rushing perspective, 12 rushing touchdowns. But you could really tell he's a quarterback where the eye test says more than the stats. You could tell in some of those games this year, he was just willing this team to victory. And the knock is, though, right now, he can't get over the hump. He can't beat Mahomes. And I think that there's still a lot of career left for him, but I do think that he's the second best quarterback in the NFL. I think that him, Burrow, and Lamar, I think it's very close. And I think it's very close also with the next guy that I'm going to bring up here. But he had a ridiculous year. I think his ability to will his team, what he means to that franchise, what he's been able to do. I think there's worlds where you could flip him and Burrow for sure, and even worlds where you could flip him and Lamar. And I hate to show recency bias towards it, but going off that MVP season, what he was able to do, what he was able to accomplish, I'm putting him at 2nd right now. And number 1, I am putting Patrick Mahomes. And I know he's coming off a terrible blowout, the worst loss of his career in the Super Bowl. But this is where I'm taking the past 5 years in perspective. This is where I'm taking some of the winning abilities that I've had. It would be really tough to look at other teams in the NFL and say, right now, do you want Patrick Mahomes? I think all of them, maybe Buffalo, Cincinnati, and Baltimore wouldn't, but I think a lot of teams in the NFL would take this guy as their quarterback and what he's been able to do. And I really think he's won in a lot of different ways in his career. He has won where he had to air the ball out to Tyreek Hill and he had to throw for 400 yards a game. And he has won in this new system. We do have to remember there are not receivers on this Kansas City team. Travis Kelce is an old man at this point, not nowhere near what he used to be. And DeAndre Hopkins is a shell of himself. A lot of the guys are second to you had Juju Smith. Like, there are guys that just are not capable receivers there. You have to look at what he's been working with, and it's not very good. Like, even at running back, Kareem Hunt is pretty much shot, and Pacheco was injured the whole year. There's just not a lot. And even if you look at the Super Bowl, a lot of the problems, he did throw two pretty bad interceptions, but the O-line was giving him no time to do anything. That's tough. You can ask anybody that's played quarterback before in their life, whatever level. If the O-line can't block for you, it is really tough to play a good, consistent game. So, did I factor maybe moving him down? Of course, I factored moving. I think the race for the top at the quarterback position is the closest that it's ever been. But it would just be such recency bias to move him down after one game like that, a game where he really had no receivers to throw to. The running backs were kind of shot, and the O-line played like crap. It would be really kind of out of line after what he's done the past 5 years to move him out of number one. So keep him at number one right now. Obviously, if there's a repeat to some of this year, like the yards are bad and all that, but for right now, he is number one. Let me know what you think of this list for the top 10 quarterbacks going in to 2025. I'm excited to hear your responses.